there, listeners. Thanks again for tuning in to Sin's Workshop. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about Renegade by Mallory McCarthy. Alright, so I'm not going to lie. I was gifted this book on NetGalley over a year ago. When the book was, probably in its prime. It was still called Renegade. I have since discovered that the publisher has decided to rename the book, publisher or author, to Heir of Lies, the first novel in the Black Dawn series. Alright, I just never got around to reading it, unfortunately, but I finally did, and I was not impressed with the story, to tell you the least. It was just very disheartening. And I say that because it had such a cool premise, which is why I requested it. I was definitely interested in reading this novel, but I felt like it fell flat quite a lot, unfortunately. And the reason being is I felt like the story was a little bit all over the place. Now, the story starts, with the main characters. It starts with their parents. I think that the parents are cool. I think that the story had a really strong beginning, let me say it that way, because you have these two characters and they're trying to build peace. They are trying to build a new world, a more democratic world, almost. And it was just, after an opening like that with these two people, they're sort of brought together and they kind of find love or equality with one another. You think the story is kind of going to be around them. It's not. Not at all. And that's what kind of distracted me, because I wanted to read about them. I didn't really want to read a time-driven story about their kids. There's very little. What the author does, what McCartney does in the prologue, she's unable to do again. She's able to quickly establish these characters and strong dynamics. However, when she shifts to these new characters, I really don't care about any of them. They're all very abrasive, with Emery being the exception. The problem is Emery is not really given a lot of focus. She kind of lingers on the edges. She doesn't really have a perspective until the very end. It's mostly just about the guys in her life, and I find that to be very distracting. But Adair and Brock and Memphis, they're all unlikable. They're all abrasive. They're all kind of just the same person as well. I will say this. Adair has a lot of conflict, a lot of inner turmoil with his power, because this is a fantasy novel. They do have magic. But there's just something lingering on the edges of the story. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere. And I think that has to go with the story is just poorly paced. But I'll talk about that in a minute, because really, the characterization here is just not great. It was easy to see the struggle that Adair was going through, and there are a few moments in his perspective where the story was exciting and we can connect to his character, but his dynamics with all the other characters, especially the male characters, like I said, they're all pretty much the same person. They were lackluster. Brock's attitude and distress, it kind of comes out of nowhere. And this connects to the poor pacing and poor structurization of this world. We don't know why Brock is so distressful. As far as we know, there's nothing going on. He's just got a chip on his shoulder and hates everything and everyone, but we don't see why. So it really just creates this wall between the reader and him, because we're not seeing what he's seeing. We don't have we haven't seen the experiences that he's gone through to create this chip on his shoulder. You know, he goes to school to become a warrior for protection. He's like, well, why do we need protection? You always need protection, even in a state of peace, because you never know what's going to happen. It's better to be prepared and not needed than to be needed and not prepared, in my opinion. Now, not saying they should have gone all out war, but they were invaded. You know, their truce was destroyed. So we do see why the army was needed in the long run. And that's what I'm getting at. I mean, all his fears, they were unwarranted. Do I agree that some of the teaching practices he encountered were uncalled for and borderline abusive? I do agree with that. We do get to see a little bit of that. But other than that, we're not really seeing much between him and the world, and him and Emery, and him and Adair, and him and Memphis. Memphis is a quiet character as well. So I feel like that's why we don't get to see Memphis. He's just a very quiet in the background character, kind of like the silent ninja type, except you forget he's there, you know, and when he comes back, it's not anything menacing or at all. It's just he's there. Oh, I overheard this. Oh, well, good for you, Memphis, for overhearing that. Bravo. I was just very turned off by the characterization, because at the core, I just was unable to connect to them, and I hate when I'm unable to connect to a character. Now, like I said, the story, it is poorly paced. The characterization is why some of the story is poorly paced. And I feel like the author just kind of rushes to it. I wanted more world building, because the opening is very good. The opening was very good. But after that, we really don't get a sense of this world. We really don't get a sense of what is happening in this world. And that's kind of what's unfortunate. You know, there's nothing really to ground the reader in this story. And then we find out at the end, oh, this is just one of many worlds. And they send Emery to Earth, basically. Now, sending her to Earth, that caught me off guard. I was just completely like, whoa, what? And now they have to, you know, and then it ends, I think, years later. Emery is living her life. She thinks her life was a dream. She doesn't recognize anyone who comes to save her. And Adair is, you know, the villain now. It's just a lot at the end, and it's like a whiplash. I will say this, the ending was kind of interesting, but everything in between that prologue and that last chapter, it just fell flat for me, unfortunately. So I hate to say it, but this was not the book for me. It was honestly a bitter disappointment. I hated the characterization in this novel, absolutely hated it. I think the author should have spent more time developing Emery and setting up a stage for her to take control of the narrative by the ending, and instead she's just a girl in the background trying to keep the peace between her guy friends, and that just seems very, very rudimentary, if you ask me. So this is Renegade, also known as Air of Lies, by Mallory McCartney. I have to give this book 2 stars. It just didn't do it for me. However, my opinion is my own. You may feel differently. I do recommend checking out the book from your local library, to just give it a shot. If you don't like it, you don't like it. And not every book is for every person. You know, we're going to read books that we love that other people hate. We're going to read books that we hate that other people love. That's just, books are art, and they are open to interpretation from everyone, in my opinion. If you end up liking the book, then I recommend buying the book in order to support the author, because that's their money making. That's how they are able to eat and live. So on that note, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Please do not forget to support me by liking this podcast and sharing it with all your book loving friends. And as always, happy reading.